this schedule really shapes up for a playoff run with a 12-team playoff.
Areas that, you need to get from experience, which is just, hey, I need to make quicker decisions.
How do you define success for this team?
National championship.
What's up, y'all? Bud Elliott here of the Cover 3 College Football Podcast. My summer school series rolls on. We try to hit as many D1 teams as we possibly can over the summer. And today it is a big one. USC. That's USCFootball.com's Ryan Abraham. Ryan, welcome back, man.
Thanks for having me on, Bud. It's been a while. It's good to talk to you. I love listening to Cover 3. I'm trying to think of when we met, like back at some recruiting event way back when. Like
I think it was even before I was at 24/7.
Yeah, I think you were. I forget what, but you wear your cowboy hat. Was that right? You'd walk around there.
Like, I had the 1 year at the opening. I had the yeah, that was.
I remember that. That was a long time ago. I think.
Get a little shade there. So USC last year 7-6. I thought some of the advanced metrics probably had them more 8-4, maybe 8.5 wins. Legitimate improvement on defense, as I think you called correctly last year, and some major offseason changes this year. What's the mood around USC right now?
I think it's still pretty positive. Like, that's not the way you want to, go through a season and be 6-6 in the regular season. It was, there was, I forget what the stat was as far as like teams. I think it was like week 11, like the number of teams out there that have had a lead in the fourth quarter in every single game. USC was in that group and they would have lost 5 games. Everyone else had only lost like one or two or something. So the fact that USC had fourth quarter leads 5 different times and lost those games, it just kind of left a sour taste, and especially the fans' mouths, and weren't able to really go on a true road game in the Big Ten and get a victory. But I think the offseason, just having, recruiting is not going to have a huge impact on what's going on in the season, but just knowing that they've revamped the personnel staff, brought in Chad Bowden from Notre Dame, and they're recruiting at a much higher level than they were before. I think it's giving people some optimism, even though that's not going to, impact anything in 2025. At least it looks like, hey, behind the scenes, it seems like they're doing the right thing. And you mentioned on the defensive side, they did get better. They did some really good things. There's some things that they just did poorly, like, sacking the quarterback and tackles for loss and things like that. But it was a big improvement, and it looked like a defense that sort of knew what it was doing compared to what you saw the last couple of years with Alex Grinch. I think the biggest head scratcher is, why did you have such a big drop off on offense where Lincoln Riley equals like top 5 offense every single year? And then you're like, whoa, what happened? And it was a big drop off there. So some concerns. There's always been concerns and everything going around there. But I think, in general, sorry for the long answer, optimism going into the 2025 season that maybe behind the scenes, they're starting to get some things right.
As an outsider, like the obvious answer to the why the huge drop on offense is no more Caleb Williams, but it sounds like it may be deeper than that. Miller Moss leaves for Louisville. They went with Jaden Maeva. Sounds like that was more their choice than his, right? So how is this going to look different in 2025?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, with Miller Moss gone, and we didn't know if Lincoln Riley would go into the portal and bring a big-time transfer in, and ended up not doing that. They did after the whole, Julian Lewis fiasco thing going to Colorado. They were able to flip Hassan Longstreet, another, 5-star guy. So they have like kind of their next up someone there, but, probably not ready for this season. And if he is, I mean, if they have to go to him, that's probably a bad sign. But, I think they've been all in on Jaden Maeva, and it just seemed when they brought him in from UNLV, there was a lot of aspects of his game that Lincoln Riley and the staff liked. And he was kind of, the high ceiling guy, but also a pretty low floor. And to see if you watch the Notre Dame game, I don't remember seeing 2 like 99-yard, 100-yard pick sixes in a row, but that's what happened. But he's made some amazing plays. If the Texas A&M game, when, in the bowl game against Texas A&M in Las Vegas, to play 3.5 quarters of pretty bad football at quarterback and then make some good plays at the end. They have to, you got to bring that in a little bit. You can lower the ceiling a little if you can raise the floor more than what it is. So I think that's the quarterback spot. Everyone just assumes Lincoln Riley, you're going to have amazing quarterback play and, make a switch. And it wasn't like a Spencer Rattler to Caleb Williams things where he goes on, you're like, man, that guy's going to be great. There was a little more questions there. So, they'll say he's 3-1 as a starter, which is true. Got a bowl win and all that, but you're going to need this offseason has to be really big for him and the staff to make sure that, hey, you're the quarterback guru guy. Take this guy who's making a bunch of mistakes and get rid of those and keep the high ceiling kind of stuff going. And I think for that to happen, that's where you're going to see this USC offense get back to where they were before.
I think you if you read into the market here, the fact that Zach Branch and Deuce Robinson left and they're getting great reviews at their new stops, it has to speak pretty highly of Lemon and Lane as one of the best 1-2 punches in the country. Is there another step those two can take?
Yeah, I mean, I think they both can. And I was listening to your show and you guys talking about that. I didn't realize, like, because when Branch looked like such an amazing player when you first got there, and then I don't know, there was something like he wasn't doing well in the special teams aspect, and just it seemed like things were kind of spiraling, and he just wasn't a guy that was getting open, getting separation and things like that. And the same thing with Deuce Robinson, big dude, but he didn't play like a guy. Like Jacoby Lane plays like a big guy, and you could see like where you're pushing people around. And I like Deuce's game a lot, but he wasn't someone that was kind of muscling people around. And maybe it was just the environment. I'm not sure. There was definitely a longer list of receivers that any one of them could have kind of stepped up. And maybe when you reduce that list a little bit and you have Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane, and they can kind of shine, and a bunch of guys sort of competing for that 3 and 4 area, which they have. But I think they can take another step with Lemon. Just is a guy who's probably pretty elusive in the open field. Maybe that doesn't look as much, but he just gets open, and he can be someone that the quarterback can rely on because he's always going to make the right play. And if he finds an open space, he's just going to go there. He just figures out a way to do things. And Lane's got a big personality. Everybody loves him, but just having that kind of physical presence out there to catch as many touchdowns as he did last year down the stretch, I mean, it was a pretty big deal. So I think that they can be a great duo. And, you're hoping, I think a lot of USC fans are hoping that both Robinson and Branch do well, but it just something seemed like it didn't click when they were at USC. And maybe it was just too deep of a receiver room. I'm not sure.
Is there a running back for college fantasy guys out there who were drafting really high on this team? And if so, who?
Everyone has been talking about Wayman Jordan. Our recruiting guy, Gerard Martinez, would watch him. And you don't get a lot of like JC guys sort of coming in and making a big impact, especially at USC. And then you see, you watch his film and everyone's just like, wow. And then you talk to the coaches, you talk to the other players, and he's just someone that looks like he's going to come in and be the number one guy. I'm not sure how the distribution is going to be. Like when you had Woody Marks, he was kind of getting the majority of touches and stuff, but and they like Brian Jackson a lot coming back, from last year. They lose Quentin Joyner, who people thought could take that next step, but just since when Jordan got in there, everyone's just sort of like, wow, okay, this is the next guy. And Lincoln Riley's made a lot of mistakes, I think, since he got to USC, but he's been really good at bringing in transfer running backs. Yeah. Every year they've had these impact guys, and it looks like, for my money, Jordan's going to be the next one.
Offensive line does lose 3 starters, but they have a very soft opening schedule. No bye weeks, really, not that I see. But I mean, Missouri State, Georgia Southern, and like they kind of ease into the conference schedule as opposed to the last few years with those big opening games. Is there confidence that this unit could even be better than last year?
I think. I think there's some, but there's also a lot of questions there as well. Just I think they've been hit or miss on the offensive line, and they went heavy portal the first couple years, and in the first year with Caleb Williams, it worked well. The second year, the offensive line did not do well, and it just seemed to not kind of click. And a lot of it comes from they just didn't recruit that position as well at the end of the Clay Helton era, and I think they've done a better job of that. They had Josh Henson before, but now you got Zach Hansen there, and I think he's shown he just has it's his second nature to go out there and recruit these guys. And I think they've recruited much better. So this line, you'll probably see a couple transfers, DJ Wingfield and Jean-Ray Reed coming in and starting, coming in for Purdue and Syracuse respectively. But the rest of the guys probably get more homegrown. And it's still depth-wise. Elijah Page, I think, is someone that they really like, and he'll be the left tackle again. But I feel like they're trying to get to that point where they're not plugging guys in for 1 year, because you never know how that's going to work. Sometimes it works well. It's not easy. It's not easy to get those guys, but they're going to try to do a little more homegrown things. So this year will be kind of a mix. Talking to people, it seemed pretty optimistic, and they love Zach Hansen, taking over as the offensive line coach, moving over from tight end. So we'll see how it goes, but I think that's going to be the key to watch. You got to get the run game going. Woody Marks was great last year. They just didn't run the ball enough, but I think they need to have more confidence in the offensive line so they can kind of do everything and not just kind of focus on one aspect of it.
Who's a wild card on this team who maybe he hits his ceiling a year before we think he will? Or on the flip side, maybe it's a guy a lot of folks have kind of given up on and they're like, whoa, he actually exploded and he played to his ceiling after we kind of thought maybe he was going to bust or maybe just be an average player. Is there a guy like that on this offense who, if he reaches that ceiling either finally or perhaps early, that it changes the look of this offense?
I think there are a couple guys you could go with. Xavier Jordan, who they really liked a lot, coming out of here in Southern California. It sort of got lost in that receiver room, but we've heard a lot of good things about him through camp. We don't get to watch too much of it, but he's someone I think that could emerge. Prince Strong came in from Boise State, and you feel like, oh, he could be that number 3 guy, and they've got some other options there. But a lot of people have told me, hey, watch out for Xavier Jordan. And I mentioned Brian Jackson earlier. I mean, a lot of people just really love his game, and just seeing him, he looks like a Lendell White kind of guy, 21 or whatever. And I think, they love Jordan a lot, but Jackson, if he's going to play at a super high level, it might be hard to keep him off the field. But that'd be a couple guys that I think maybe you weren't expecting to have, big seasons, but potentially could.
Awesome. All right. On the flip side, we'll talk a little Trojans defense.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, guys, welcome back in here on the Cover 3 College Ball Podcast. That's Ryan Abraham, USCFootball.com. We are talking the Trojans here. Let's get into this defense, which last year was actually fun to watch. And D'Anton Lynn did an awesome job coming over from UCLA. What's the next step for this defense in 25?
Yeah, he did. I think you're right. I think he did a great job. The fact that, his alma mater, Penn State, came after him really hard before taking the defensive coordinator from the defending national champion. I think they realized, USC needed to step up and keep him because they did play just fundamentally better football. And I know like the depth on the defensive line wasn't very good. They're, moving bodies around that just weren't, kind of playing out of position and all that. But I feel like if you watch them, it didn't look like there was these huge busts or guys running down the field. No one's covering them and a zillion missed tackles and all that. It just, the fundamentals of football were there. You felt like maybe the horses aren't quite there yet. So I think they really wanted to keep him and that staff together. I like Matt Entz a lot. He wasn't the best recruiter, but he ends up going, the linebacker coach. USC's for Bud, like the last several years, USC's linebacker play, they've just been like non-existent. You want linebackers to be like they're just making plays all over the place, and they just seem to be like there for years, before, whatever was going on. And Matt Entz, I think, changed that. Now they're hoping Rob Ryan can keep that going because he's gone on, Matt Entz has gone on and become the Fresno State head coach. So I feel like the next step is they've done a lot of good things. They were pretty efficient. Like I think they were really good on third down. It was really the making big plays in the backfield, sacks, tackles for loss. That's where it was lacking. So I think now you have to see, all right, we need to generate, pass rush with that front four. They've tried to really upgrade, the guys on the defensive line and hope they can do that. But I think that's the big, next step is like, it's great to be fundamentally sound, but it's tough to keep that up, especially when the offense isn't performing at a super high level. Get after the quarterback, be disruptive, make some of those big negative plays that they were lacking. And I think that's how this defense can take the next step.
Who are the guys on that defensive front who they really need to take that jump?
So, I mean, Anthony Lucas came in as transfer from Texas A&M and, former 5-star, and there was a lot of excitement about him. There was injuries and all that. And I feel like he's going to be one of the end starters this year. I mean, they like him a lot. Bringing in like Keyshawn Silver from Kentucky, who's one of the guys that was banged up a little bit and didn't get to see a ton of him. But then, we hear a lot of good things. He's just this big body that's kind of eating up space. He's not someone that was like Nate Clifton, who transferred in at 275 and bulked up to 295, and you're trying to play him in the middle. But a homegrown kid, Devin Tompkins, I think they like him a lot too. I think he can be one of the defensive tackles and play really well there. And then Cameron Fountain, watch him number 1. There was a lot of hype about him, coming in there too. I think Jakeem Stewart, everyone's talked about just because he's, should still be in high school and he looks like he's a college junior. So they have a lot more options, I think, on the defensive line, guys that can come in and make plays. But if you just watch, just watching them warm up or doing the drills that we get to watch in spring football, it looked like a whole different like you were a different planet or something. Like, this looks very different than what they had last year. We'll see if they can play, but I think Anthony Lucas is a guy that's probably the main one that you need to come in there and start making plays. He has to be disruptive. There's so much potential there. We just haven't seen a lot of it since he's been at USC. I mean, I think this defensive line, but there's like a handful, like 3 or 4 sacks, like total on their career sheets. So they need to step up and make some big plays. But those are a few of the guys I think that'll, have the opportunity to do that.
In the back end, a lot of new faces as the secondary has a ton of turnover. Who do we need to know about on that side?
Couple transfers. You got DJ Harvey coming in and Bishop Fitzgerald that I think they're both probably penciled in as starters. They do lose a lot in the secondary. They were pretty deep. And I think things are going to center around Kamari Ramsey. I just feel like he's going to be, the leader. He's someone that could have, gone on to the NFL, came over with Danton Lynn from UCLA. So I think he's going to sort of be the centerpiece of all that. But they like Harvey and Fitzgerald a lot. I got to interview in depth both of those guys as transfers in, coming in and seeing what they've, being veterans and having that presence in the locker room. And I feel like they're coming in and they're going to do some good things for USC in the secondary. A lot of bodies, a lot of production to replace, but from the coaches and everything we talked to, those are a couple of guys that they feel really confident can come in and play right away.
So with a friendlier Big Ten draw this year than last year, at least, based on my look, no Ohio State. How do you define success for USC this year?
Yeah, 6-6. I think you got to win some road games in the Big Ten, and there'll be 3 like Midwesty trips, like to the Chicago area. They have Purdue, Illinois. Illinois is going to be pretty good. And then they got Notre Dame, which isn't a conference game, but I think I'm flying to Chicago for all 3 of those. I don't see. I got to figure that out. Maybe Indy, but going to Nebraska. To me, the Nebraska game might be sort of like what defines this program, because Nebraska, looks like they're getting better. USC got them at home last season, and I think a lot of Nebraska fans felt like there were so many mistakes were made in that game that game they could have had it. And they're going to be fired up. UCLA went into Lincoln last year and got a win. So I think they're really going to beat one of those LA teams at home. And I feel like that could be the game that sort of decides, like, hey, you beat Nebraska on the road. They might be a fringe top 25 team. You're going to probably be pretty good. Maybe you win 8 or 9 games, but if you lose that game, then maybe you're back to 6 or 7 wins again. So I think that might be one of the key ones, but we know Illinois is going to be really good. You get Michigan at home. They had Michigan last year on the road and couldn't finish us off. I think Michigan's going to be significantly better this year. So that could be a lot tougher. So it's not playing Oregon, not playing Ohio State. I think all of that helps. But they need to they can't just be dead on the road like they were and lose games at the end. To be Maryland's only Big Ten win, Bud, is not, you can't, that's no bueno. You can't have stuff like that happen. So it might not be the record.
Well, but the Maryland game, that
was bad. What is like a 13-point lead in the final minutes or whatever, and end up losing that. But I feel like they have to take that step and just getting, they beat UCLA on the road, but that doesn't really count. It's a bus, not a flight. So just getting on the road, getting a win in the Big Ten, I think is going to be big. And, it might not be the record. It might be just how you look in these games and not blowing a bunch of fourth quarter leads, or, being able to not just do that, but be able to have a bigger lead, against Maryland. So even if you screw up at the end, you can't blow it. So I think a lot of different ways to define success, probably not super precise for you there, but if it's a games, at least winning 8, I think a lot of fans would love to see 9, but it's not that, a super hard schedule as far as the top end teams. A lot of teams that you're going to probably be fairly even with, you got to win some of those games where they didn't last year.
For sure. Ryan, really appreciate it, man. I feel like I'm totally schooled up now on USC. Everybody just check out uscfootball.com. I'll see you at probably Elite 11, and also you going to Vegas?
Oh yeah, going to Vegas. This should be fun. Any excuse to go to Vegas, Bud. I'm there. So maybe we'll play some golf.
Yeah, let's bring the sticks.
Oh, I love it.
All right.